My people, it's time to move out. Move out.
Hey, this is Fred from the Fly Project, answering some questions today from Mike H. Mike wanted to know why I would choose to fish a Trout Spey rod setup versus a normal single hand setup. What would be some of the reasons for that? In my mind, in my applications, I have found that learning to spey cast increases your efficiency as an angler greatly through a lot of different aspects. And it honestly doesn't matter whether I'm using a 9-foot 5-weight rod set up with a floating line and a dry fly. I found that a lot of spey casting casts and styles, they cross over and they make my fishing more efficient. The reason that I would then choose to use a spey style rod or a two-handed rod versus a single hand rod is that efficiency level is just increased even more. So a couple of those reasons would be, one, if I'm standing wading deeply in the water, that longer rod just is a more effective tool for casting distance. If I'm standing up against a bank and I'm dealing with false casting issues where I just don't have room to make a long false cast, the spey rod and the spey cast just makes that much easier to then get that distance without having to steeple cast, or sometimes you just simply cannot false cast with enough line to get to where you need to. The spey rod solves that problem beautifully. Another thing that Mike wanted to know was, what is the all-around or the equivalent of a 9-foot 5-weight if we were going to relate that to a Trout Spey version rod? And if we can consider that the 9-foot 5-weight is kind of the basis of an all-around trout fishing tool, then I would relate that most to a 11-foot 3-weight in the spey world. So we're basically adding 2 feet to that rod and decreasing the line weight by 2. So if you were going to relate it to a 4-weight rod, you'd be looking at a 2-weight spey rod. If you were going to relate it to a 6-weight single hand rod, you'd be relating that more to a 4-weight Trout Spey rod. So there's definitely a difference in the line weight categories. It can be very confusing to people, but my all-around favorite Trout Spey tool would be an 11-foot-ish, and we can go up or down, 6 inches from there, but would be the 3-weight. And then if I want to throw some bigger streamers, then I'm going to bump that line size up to what would be closer related to a 6-weight, and that would be the 11-foot-ish 4-weight. So one other question that Mike asks, and we hear this a lot in the fly shop, is, can you use any fly reel for your Trout Spey setup? And the answer is essentially yes. There are some benefits to certain styles of reels that we will also go over in another video. But if you want to balance your 11-foot rod with an equivalent reel, then the reel that you're looking for is going to be likely what we would consider to be a 7-8 weight size. So a 3 or 4 weight spey rod is going to balance beautifully with a 7-8 weight size reel. And we're looking at somewhere between 3.5 and 4 inches in diameter for that spool size. And that's simply just to balance, a longer rod. So an 11-foot rod is going to take a little bit more reel weight to balance that rod properly. Also, you're going to need a little bit more line capacity to handle the thicker spey line that is going to be involved in the process. One other thing that you can also cross over is that if you have that 7-8 weight reel and you have a 7 or 8 weight sized floating line on that, you will find that line can actually work beautifully on your 3 or 4 weight Trout Spey rod. I have found that, just for an example, the Rio Grand fly line in a 7 weight works great as a Scandi line on a 3 weight Trout Spey setup. I just lengthen my leader a little bit, and whether I'm swinging soft tackles or throwing streamers, you can use that line well. I also will typically use my 11-foot 3-weight and 4-weight rods for lake fishing. Sometimes if I'm standing on the lake in Montana and the wind's blowing, I can two-hand cast and send that line a lot farther than I could with a 9-foot single-hand rod, whether I want to do a Spey style cast or if I've got room, an overhead cast. So there's a lot of crossover that you can do with some of the tackle that you probably already own. Hopefully I've answered your questions, Mike, and anyone else that has questions out there or maybe have thought those same things, hopefully that helps you as well. And if you have more questions, please keep them coming. Leave them in the comments. You can message us directly on our Instagram channel, and you can shop all these good things at flyproject.us.